Good evening. On Left, Right and Centre tonight, we'll be looking at the standoff in Sabarimala once again. The temple opened this evening to devotees at 5 o'clock. And once again, for the third time after the Supreme Court's September verdict, there are activists and devotees who are going to try to make an attempt to enter the temple once and for all. However, on day one itself, it was clear that protesters who are not in favor of the Supreme Court verdict are going to do everything in their power to prevent any woman between the ages of 10 and 50 from going inside. That was very evident today when activist Trupti Desai, who had actually been leading this whole campaign to allow women to enter all places of worship, she landed at Kochi airport this morning and wasn't able to enter the city. Even she wasn't able to leave the airport because there was a huge crowd of protesters outside and they simply refused to let her step out. She's had to in fact go back to Pune, where she is from. Today, the Devaswom Board, which runs the Sabarimala temple, has also decided in a very important move to approach the Supreme Court seeking more time to implement the Supreme Court verdict. This is significant because until now, the state government and the board had been saying that they would have to respect the verdict and implement it in letter and spirit. But now clearly, seeing that this standoff isn't going anywhere, they have decided that indeed they would have to approach the Supreme Court for more time. Well, joining us tonight at this time is my colleague Alok Pandey, who is there at the base camp. And Alok, how are things right now? It looks pretty calm and peaceful behind you, although we've seen quite a lot of drama through the day.
Well, yes, Nidhi, you're right. It actually does. In fact, I'll just step aside and ask Babu to give you a few shots of all these devotees who've been streaming in all day today. Pamba is essentially the base camp, and people come here and then start the trek. A 3 to 4 kilometer trek upwards in the hills to reach Sabarimala. It's been peaceful here today, perhaps also because Trupti Desai, as you were pointing out, was at the Cochin airport and she couldn't even come out of it because there were many who felt that she shouldn't be there and they squatted outside the airport refusing to let her leave. And that's why perhaps you had a situation here where you see only men and you don't really see any women who are younger than 50 years old here at the moment, though as we have been told earlier, news reports have suggested that as many as 500 such women have registered themselves with the Kerala police to come here. But on day one, today at least, there has been no sign of that. And no one's turned up here. We don't know how the next few days will pan out. There was a lot of security on the way also, Nidhi. We were coming up today from Trivandrum, from Thiruvananthapuram, and we saw that there was a lot of security. In fact, private vehicles are not being allowed here to Pamba. There's another place 20 kilometers away called Nilakkal, and that's where everyone who's coming by private transport is being made to stop. And then everyone needs to get onto a Kerala government bus and come here. So those are the kind of measures that the government has taken. The police is also conducting a lot of checks, but we did not see anyone else from any organization, from any ideology, conducting any kind of checks here or anywhere else closer to where the temple steps are or closer to where the trek to the temple starts. That is something that we did not see. So it remains to be seen how the next few days, Nidhi, are going to pan out.
All right, well, good to see that it's calm at the moment. Alok, thanks a lot for joining us on the program this evening to look at whether faith should be trumping the rule of law. We have Madhvi Menon, professor at Ashoka University. Padma Pillai is an activist with the Ready to Wait campaign. On the other side of the debate, Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate of the Supreme Court, joining us. He wrote a very interesting piece just recently on the Sabarimala issue. Mr. Deshratan Nigam is here in the studio with us, and Binoy Vasan, Rajya Sabha MP of the CPI, also joining us tonight. Mr. Hegde, let me begin with you first, because I have a feeling that your piece is going to generate a lot of debate. You actually wrote recently in The Hindu that you're actually comparing India and Pakistan when it comes to this issue. You've said on the streets of India and Pakistan, a frightening message is being sent out that courts must not rush in where politicians fear to tread, and that the public and political responses to Supreme Court judgments in the Sabarimala case in India and the Asia Bibi case in Pakistan have striking similarities. Can you explain that to our viewers tonight?
Well, much as people deny it, India and Pakistan came from the same kind of history and geography. Pakistan was created on religious lines. India remained a secular state. But both are deeply religious societies. In religious societies, when matters reach the courts and when the courts give a verdict, what is the public response to the verdict, especially when the verdict is not what the majority of the public wants to hear. In Pakistan, the majority of the public wanted Asia Bibi to be hanged. They did not care for the niceties of evidence or whether there was evidence or not. Today, we see a lot of polls that a majority of the people in Kerala seem to think that women between in the ages of 10 and 50 should not be allowed to enter. So, wherever there is a judgment which goes against majoritarian sentiment, the reaction spills off on the street. And then comes the question for the state. Do we abide by the rule of law? Are we governments of bound by the rule of law, or are we to give in to street sentiment? I advance the proposition that the rule of law is the holy compact that keeps this nation together. You cannot abandon the rule of the law. If the Supreme Court gives a judgment, then the judgment has to be followed till such time it is reversed through the process of law. You may not like a judgment. You may demonstrate against the judgment. You may write against it. You may file review petitions. But you cannot resort to violence to circumvent the judgment, or you cannot dare the court and the law to not to enforce the judgment.
I think that's
that
also important.
Is simply not
or to
invoke, then society
or
will
to even invoke what the majority apparently thinks, to say that the Supreme Court verdict would not be respected. Madhavi Menon, do you agree with that? Do you agree with the comparison Sanjay Hegde has made there, and what he's saying that we are giving into street sentiment over a Supreme Court order at the end of the day? And is that healthy for our democracy?
I mean, it's not just street sentiment. I mean, I'm not sure it's useful to think about this as faith against law, because I don't think the people who want to enter Sabarimala are not the faithful, or are not devotees. And in fact, it's a very pernicious opposition to say, oh, it's either the devotees or the activists, because the activists are devotees themselves and devotees themselves are activists. So, we like thinking in terms of absolute opposites and black and white, and that's simply not the case here. The only thing that seems very clear is that this is an extremely misogynistic, patriarchal reaction shared by men and women who are invested in a certain kind of violent resistance, not just to the rule of law and the Supreme Court order, but to the very idea of thinking about women as equal human beings. I mean, this is what is so, well, it shouldn't be shocking, right? We've lived with this for centuries, but it continues to shock me. That this level of misogyny should be allowed and should be given so much airtime and screen time for so long in our country.
But maybe just to point out that it's there, we're at least having that conversation.
Let's hope so, but I would hope that also the 550 women who have registered to visit Sabarimala in this season will therefore be allowed to enter, rather than being kept out by mob violence, because for centuries, frankly, that's exactly what's happened to us.
But Mr. Nigam, wouldn't you say, and we've had this debate endlessly then, that at least until the Supreme Court reviews its order, and we don't know how that is going to go, the court is very clear that its original order stays. Women of all ages can enter the temple. Therefore, they shouldn't be stopped from entering the temple.
See, the very fact tomorrow the review petition may decide otherwise. That option is already available.
Yeah, but the judgment stands.
Judgment stands. But suppose people go and tomorrow the judgment is reversed, then what happens?
What happens?
Sanctity of the temple goes. The entire belief system which is with the temple goes.
So is the belief system more important than the rule of law? That's at the heart of this.
I'll tell you what law is. Law is made by the representatives of the people, right? When you talk of law, I agree there is a verdict by the Supreme Court, and the popular sentiment is against that verdict. What I wish had taken place till the review petitions is decided, this entire judgment should have been stayed. That would have taken care of everything. Then there would have been a finality to the judgment, because there is a review petition, there is a curative petition.
But that didn't happen. That's within the courts.
No, that's fine.
Right.
That's fine. Huh. But that is creating a lot of problem. And let me tell you, when you talk of devotee, who is a devotee? Devotee is someone who is devoted to that particular deity, who believes in what deity stands for. And in Hinduism, it is a living deity. It's a living being. That's the whole issue. Our beliefs and traditions, and it's not pure gender discrimination. It is between 10 to 50 age group. Otherwise, women are going there as per their own beliefs. And therefore, once you talk of being a devotee, devotee has to believe in that particular deity.
So there may be women who do and who still want to go into the temple.
But they won't be believing.
Why,
No,
who
why
is
I
to
am
sit
saying
in judgment that they're not devotees,
see,
as
I'll
Madhavan was
tell
pointing
you,
out?
the very fact that devotee stands for certain beliefs, and that the deity stands for certain beliefs, and it's a living deity. When you say you are devoted to that deity, you have to respect what that deity stands for.
Right then how are we different from Pakistan?
See, Pakistan phobia. I think Sanjay Hegde has been having dinner with lot of, on the lighter side, having dinner with lot of 1 or 2 BJP leaders, and he's also got into that Pakistan phobia. But that's on the lighter side. But the fact remains, Pakistan is a different society, and ours is a way of life which varies from place to place, and those way of life has got very intricate, weaving with everyday
The principles
affairs.
are the same, as Mr. Hegde points out, that the so-called majority in Pakistan wants to see Asia Bibi executed for blasphemy, and the majority here has a sentiment, a sentiment that is going against the Supreme Court verdict. But what do you do when you're supposed to uphold constitutional law and the Constitution and the Supreme Court?
In a parliamentary democracy, whatever you may say, it is the will of the people, and that goes by majority.
So you are advocating majoritarianism?
No, I am saying will of the people. How do you judge a will of the people?
Then why do you have a Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court
disband it.
No, Supreme Court is for interpretation, and finality still has to take place.
That's not the point.
Finality still has to take place.
Sanjay Hegde, do you want to quickly get into this before I go to Padma and Mr. Vishwan?
See, there is a final verdict already. The final verdict was on one particular regulation under an act of the Kerala legislature. That rule said that women are not allowed. So essentially you have a man-made law which sanctifies the custom. That man-made law is tested against the man-made constitution, and constitutional morality prevails, and they say that no, this law is unconstitutional. Now comes the question of the devotee. It is a relationship between the devotee and the God, and God can take care of himself. The deity can take care of himself. The deity does not need human agency. If the deity wishes to ensure that women do not enter, the deity has his or her ways. Ultimately, the answer to Mr. Nigam and others of his ilk was given by Bulle Shah, who said, "Are logo, tumhara kya? Main janu, mera khuda jane." So it's between God and the devotee. Why should a man-made legislation come in the way, especially when we have a constitution which does not sanctify any discrimination on grounds of sex?
I just need to get the other panelists in. Mr. Vishwan, you are a member of parliament. You're from Kerala. Do you think that this could have been better handled by the state government? At the end of the day, did the state government fail to ensure that the Supreme Court verdict was implemented properly? Whose responsibility was it?
You please tell me, what else can a government do? The government in Kerala, the left governments, it behaved in a most appropriate manner. It was duty bound, and it is duty bound to uphold the Supreme Court verdicts. It is not the government went for Supreme Court verdicts. It's an organization sponsored by the RSS, the Young Lawyers Forum, went to the Supreme Court asking for women entry. And Supreme Court made a very categorical verdict that there can be no discrimination between men and women. So a government which is a constitutional government, which can run only on the lines of the constitution, can do what the Kerala government is doing now. That's what's happening here. I can tell you one more thing. I stand by the original position of the RSS, not the present position. The RSS has an original position which states that among the believers there cannot be a demarcation line between men and women. There is RSS position that up to what extent in a temple a man can enter, to that extent a woman also can enter. This is the original position of the RSS. But because of political compulsions only for electoral gains, RSS and BJP made a somersault.
But sir,
unfortunately,
sir,
the Congress
respectfully,
also has joined them. They are
law and
playing
order
politics.
is
Don't
the
blame
state
the
government's
government for
problem.
that.
The state government should have ensured that there is law and order, that women who do want to go into the temple are able to do so. You've not been able to do that in Kerala.
That is what the government is trying to do with a lot of difficulties, because there are people with political motivations, only political motivations, trying to distract the government from doing its duty. And they are bringing in the name of the religion and the God and the deity for political purposes. I believe that no gods are supposed to play a political role. No religion should be a stick in the hands of any political party. But now in Kerala, both the BJP controlled by the RSS and the Congress party, they are trying to play politics and alone politics.
Okay.
And a government.
Well, I don't know how that excuses the state government from its role.
A government is trying to uphold the Supreme Court verdicts.
Well, Padma Pillai, the question that of course has been debated ever since this whole controversy broke and the order came, is it ultimately comes down to a question of choice, doesn't it? I mean, obviously there will be women like yourself, many others who do not want to enter the temple despite the Supreme Court order, who are very well within their rights to say no, we will not. But what about the 500 plus women who do? And why are they any less devoted, or why are they not devotees? I mean, they are as devoted as say you are.
Okay, to answer that question first then, when you say a devotee of Ayyappa, you are essentially bound to be devoted to Ayyappa's concept, to the concept of the worship that he has prescribed. If you say that I believe in Ayyappa, but I don't believe in the rules set by him, and I believe that those rules were man-made, but the Ayyappa who was consecrated in that temple, on that stone or that murti, by the same tantri, but you are not willing to obey the rules of that tantri. See, the concept of a Paramatman who is available equally to everybody is still valid, but temples are not places of Advaita. Temples are places where the essence of Paramatman is brought into a semi-human form. The deities are fed food, the deities are given a bath, the deities are put to sleep. So they have the same kind of human failings and advantages and disadvantages, and that is part of the narrative that is set in the temple. I do not know why is it so difficult to understand that when there is a deity being consecrated, that itself is man-made. Then you claim that the rules are man-made, the constitution is man-made.
What about the Supreme Court's order? Can I ask you that if tomorrow the review petition does not go your way, are you going to respect it? Are you going to respect the Supreme Court's verdict? If the if the court rejects the review petitions and says no, we stand by the verdict we gave in September, will you respect it?
So the first point, what we are protesting as ready to wait, as many of the
I'm asking a very simple question, ma'am. Will you respect the Supreme Court verdict if the review petition is rejected?
Yeah. So I'll give you,
Yes or no?
I will demand an ordinance from both the governments. I'll demand an ordinance. It's not a question of respecting the verdict. Everybody respects every verdict that comes out of courts. But there are remedies given to us in a democratic society where the parliament, the lawmakers of this country can expand the constitution, can amend it.
So you don't have any, so you don't care what the Supreme Court will say, you will do what you want to do.
Unlike the case of Asiya Bibi where she is going to die, unlike the case of Asiya Bibi where she is going to die if something untoward happens, this is not the case. Not going to Sabarimala does not affect the physical, financial life of any woman. So the government needs to consider whether for 550 or 700 people who have registered, it wants to destroy a tradition which has been followed by lakhs of people. And whether the Article 25 rights of somebody needs to be thwarted completely.
Okay, let me take this to Madhavi Menon here. Okay.
Yeah. So
Madhavi, I just had another question to add to that, apart from what Ms. Pillai was saying. You know, when activists like Trupti Desai, and there have been a couple of others, try to, in a sense, hijack this entire sort of news cycle with this sort of attempt to enter the temple, etc. Does that help or hurt the cause of those other 500 women who are obviously long-standing devotees who want to find a way to enter the temple? I mean, I'm just saying whether activists like these, who may not necessarily be believers in Ayyappa, are actually doing more harm to the cause.
I really find it problematic to phrase the question as a matter of hijacking, because to my mind, what's been hijacked is this entire idea of Ayyappan as having written down certain rules that have to be followed. Can anyone show us where any of these rules have been written? Any scripture that lays down these rules? These rules are all, to use the sexist phrase, man-made. It is a phrase that I usually dislike deeply, but it is man-made because it is created by men, and not just any men, by the Brahmins who run the temples in Kerala and in other parts of the country. So the only custom and tradition that we are following here is a Brahminical patriarchal insistence on the uncleanness of women. I mean, that is at base and at superstructure what is going on here. So to finally say, oh, the deity has a will that devotees need to obey is just utter nonsense. This is one of the most syncretic, secular, wide-ranging, welcoming temples in this entire country. And now what people want to do is sort of shut it down, diminish its power and its effect that it has on a lot of devotees. And so then to go back to your question about Tripti Desai, I'm afraid I simply will not accept the fact that there is a distinction between devotees and feminists. I mean, I think all of us should be feminist enough to realize that...
Do you think she's making an important point by trying to...
I think she's making at least as important a point as the point that has been made by the Brahmins of Kerala for centuries, trying to control and disseminate their own power. That to me is the hijacking of an agenda, not this which is trying to rectify and address certain wrongs, historical wrongs, which is exactly what the Supreme Court is trying to do as well.
See, let me tell you, once somebody makes a statement the way my co-panelist has made,
Can I come in for a minute?
Is the fact one forgets that this has developed in a society which was matriarchal and matrilineal. Most largely the Kerala.
Doesn't make it any less
no,
misogynist.
no.
The Brahmins were not
hold on.
matriarchal or matrilineal.
Please don't interrupt. You had your chance. And once that society is developed, and you have all women temple there where men are not allowed. So all these local traditions exist, and we respect where men are not allowed, and we equally want that the other side should also. It is not about gender. So these are the traditions that have developed, and they are holding on. And deity decides. It's and even Supreme Court says in Hinduism, Hindu culture, Hindu way of life, deity is a living being. It's a settled law.
Madhvi Menon points out, where is this written down?
The Supreme Court says so in its law.
About Ayyappa.
Lord Ayyappa, it's oral tradition which is going on. It is need not to be written. In fact, the exact answer I can give you.
Mr. Hegde, sorry, Ms. Pillai, one second, I'll give you a chance. Yes, Mr. Hegde.
Can I come in?
Mr. Hegde.
It was by an act of legislature under which there was a rule which was promulgated, and that rule was sought to be given effect to by the Kerala High Court in an earlier judgment. That judgment was by Justice Paripurnan, who received a public interest litigation letter saying that some woman has entered the temple and that violates the rules. Therefore, it was a court judgment of the Kerala High Court which then was considered by a constitution bench of the Supreme Court along with the regulation in question, and the Supreme Court, while interpreting the constitution, said this is a transformative constitution. This is a constitution which specifically allows for universal entry into temples for all Hindus. To discriminate against women between the ages of 10 to 50 is entirely unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has ruled on the constitution and on a legislation. It has not ruled on matters of faith. If you rest your faith on matters of legislation and that legislation is unconstitutional, then the constitution prevails. You can have your faith. You can, as a woman between 10 and 50, say, I will voluntarily not go.
Exactly.
But you cannot, as a matter of your faith, say that another woman of 10 to 50 will not be allowed to enter and that I will resort to violence to enforce that.
I think which is why this verdict by the Supreme Court actually goes way beyond Sabarimala, and the point that Sanjay Hegde was trying to make in his piece as well. It's not about Pakistan or comparing ourselves to Pakistan, but just that whether we want majoritarianism to trump the rule of law at the end of the day in this country, and that has wider ramifications, across subjects. Thank you to you all for joining us. Here is hoping that those who are protesting will keep it peaceful, and we'll have to wait and see how the next few days go in Sabarimala. Thanks for joining us.